Hello, I'm Mike Nettleship, and this is part 3 of a 6-part video about how I made this guitar. If you haven't seen the previous parts, why not subscribe and then watch them before you watch this? Otherwise, just carry on. If you enjoy it, please give me the thumbs up. Well, I've got it down to pretty much the right shape, but I've got to tell you, the surf horn just didn't do the job. I had to get back to the vicious rasp. That tool is definitely the best way of removing unwanted wood. But as you can see, nearly there, but it's pretty rough, so now I'm going to file it down and sand it so that it's finished to the almost to the point that I want to get it to before I do the actual finishing. I've been showing you different ways of removing the wood using different tools to make the body shape. And I've shown you the other side that I was making, shampooing it off using the rasp and then smoothing it down. Well, I think this is an easier way actually. I thought I'd try this one using the spoke shave, which I've mentioned before. It's the tool for cutting curves on wood. And so what I did was this. I've done this side, I marked it out with pencil like I did on the other one, like I showed you, and I'm just using the spoke shave. I haven't set the blade too deep or it locks into the wood, gets stuck and judders. But if you set it at a nice shallow angle, you can just keep plodding on and removing the shavings a bit at a time. And I've got the lines on to guide me, and the beauty of this is when you've finished doing it, then it's nice and smooth and you just have to sand it down, make sure it's level and sand it down, but it's fairly level once you've finished with this. And so as you can see, just a nice smooth action. And what I've done to clamp it into this workmate is it was too low if you clamp it in straight down, so I've blocked it up with this block of wood here, put clamps in to hold it steady, otherwise it just shoots out, and just padded it where it rests on the edge of this wood so it doesn't damage the edge of the mahogany. So that's nice, fairly sturdy, and I can just plane away until it's nicely to shape, just like the one on the other side which I've already done. The neck is quite a complicated piece to make, and I decided to make a template before cutting it properly. And because it tapers, it's a little bit dodgy. I've put a bit of thought into this, and I've got a neck that I'm measuring and using as an example. It's one I bought from somebody that wants either throwing away or completely redoing and refretting because they're all worn and it's a bit of a mess, but it's okay for a template. So I've done some measurements on that, and the nut I bought for the top, a gold-plated nut, which is here. I've left it in the packet because I don't want to get fingerprints all over it, and the people who supplied it kindly sent me a free plectrum. Very good. This is 43mm. So because that's 43mm, I'm not sure if they do vary in size, probably not by much. That means that the top of the neck has got to be 43mm. So here I've marked out a template. I've got a straight edge piece of wood, square, and I've drawn a pencil line, not sure whether you can see it, drawn a pencil line down the centre, okay, straight down the centre. I've got my set square, I've drawn a line across at the bottom there, measured the length of the fretboard, and then drawn a line at the top at 90 degrees. Then where the top is, and this is going to be 43mm, remember, once you've got your straight line, then you can use that to base the tapered shape of the neck on. So at the top we've got 43mm in total, so you measure half of that, 21.5mm from the centre line to the outside, and the same at the other side. And the bottom of the guitar I think is just a minute, measure it again. 57 millimeters. So I've halved that, and again drawn half to that side, marked half to that side, and then when you join the points up, you've got your perfectly tapered piece of wood as a template. So I know that the angles are going to be right when I do the rest of it. So I'm going to cut this out now. I've made this slightly bigger than the size I need, because I know when I use the bandsaw to cut it, the saw blade is just going to waver about a little bit, but this has got to be absolutely perfect when I've finished it, because I'm going to use it to run a router down to shape the actual neck itself. So I'll go and cut this now, and then when I've cut the rough sizes out, I can plane it down to the exact size that I'm wanting, and know that it's an exact shape with perfectly straight edges, and it will be the correct dimensions. I'm going to start on the neck now, and I'm going to make one that goes off at an angle like that back, as opposed to some like fenders straps which come in there and straight like that. They use one piece of wood, cut a notch out, and then it's just straight up there, but I prefer that. I think it looks a bit nicer. And to do this, I'm going to have to do what's called a scarf joint, as they've done on this one here. I made this one. This is one that was in a kit thing that I bought, and you can see that line just there. That's where they've done the scarf joint. So that piece there is actually stuck onto this stem down here, and that's what I'm going to do. So I've got this piece of wood here, which is the main part of the fretboard, and it's actually part of an old pub table from a pub in Glasgow in Scotland, and I bought 14 of these tops some while ago, knowing that they'd come in handy sometime. And it's beech, so it's very hard wood, it's stable, quite heavy, and it's quite old, so it should be well cured and everything. So this is the bottom part of the neck, and for the piece at the top where the tuners and the tighteners are going to be, or machine heads, I'm going to use this piece, and I want this piece because it's got a bit of grain there that I want for the top of the head. So I've got to cut this so that this fits on here, and it's got to be at roughly a certain angle, so that it ends up like that. When it's done, this piece here will be stuck to there. So to get this angle, it's about 13 degrees. Measure halfway down from the end of the wood here, if I can find a tape measure, my mammoth tape measure here. Halfway, 6 inches down. Put a mark. Now this front is going to be cut off. This front at an angle, 6 inches down. Now if you draw a line from that 6-inch mark up to the top corner there, so it's at a diagonal, that'll be 13 degrees, give or take, whatever. And you can just put a straight rule on that and do it, but I'm just using this adjustable set square, so that it makes life a little bit easier. And we put that just there. I'm going to use a felt tip pen, a bit easier to see. Put the mark there. And then I'm going to put a mark all the way around. Mark there, and put that on there, like so. And that is the piece that's going to be taken off. So I'm going to cut that on the bandsaw. I'm going to cut that off, but I've got to mark this now so that it'll fit onto that. And what's going to happen is, when I've cut that piece off there, that piece off, this piece will fit onto it, butt up to it, like that. and that will give me the angle off at the top. So on this piece, the section that's got to come off is the front here. So this comes off, and when it's cut, that will just back up to there. This piece here will actually become part of the straight piece, and then the angle will go off there. So I'll mark this up, and I've got to cut it on the bandsaw, and I'll do that, and we'll go on from there. I've now cut the piece of wood for the neck to size out of that bigger piece you saw earlier, and I've got the main part, which is the back. I've cut the piece which is going to be the fretboard stuck onto there, and the piece that was cut off and then fitted so that it's the top of the fretboard, and I've done a rough cut of that for the headpiece, sort of in the same vein as the shape of the main body, and I've stuck that together, and it's got to be shaped yet. But when you stick that, can you see the joint there? There we are. There's the joint where the top piece has been stuck to the bottom piece, but that is never going to fit so that it's dead flush, and when I did fit it, that was a little bit higher on there. So what I've done is I've got the plane and planed it flat, so that is now dead flush, and it's ready for the fretboard piece to be fitted on. But before I do that, I've got to cut the slot out to put the truss rod in. So I'll do that, I think, before I do anything else. Okay, I'm ready to cut the slot now for the truss rod. I've put the neck in the vise here. I've got a piece of wood here which is going to use as a guide, clamped onto the workmate, and of course this is at a different angle because it's at a different angle, we're not working square here. So I put this into the vise, put the router on, positioned it so that the cutter is going to be on the centre line, and then I clamped this piece of wood to there. Then I went to the other side, did the same there, router on the middle line, clamp the wood. So now when I slide that down, it'll go down the centre of the fretboard. And here I've got the truss rod. It's a two-way truss rod, which means that it will bend that way and that way, so it will allow for warpage either way on the neck. They used to just put a one-way, which was pretty hopeless because you could only do it one way. Now the width of this, I've measured it with my measurer here, 6mm that way. So I've got a 6mm cutter in here. Now it's slightly bigger at the end, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the majority of it 6mm, and it's 9mm, did I say 9mm? Yeah, 9mm deep. So I'm going to set the router to 9mm deep, cut it all the way down to where I've marked it, because I've put the truss rod in there where the end will be just at the top of the nut, and marked the truss rod at the bottom there. So I'm just going to stop it there, can't go all the way through, and then I'm just going to route the top bit in here just a little bit bigger to accommodate this, because as you can probably see there, it's a little bit thicker. Okay, so I'll get on with that.
that was the first run because I didn't want to do the full cut, the full depth cut in the first run. It's quite tough, this wood. So that's the first groove, and I'll just see if that's about the right size. So it's not about the right size, it's absolutely perfect. So now I'll just reset the cutter depth, and I'll do the full depth cut down the full length of it. And now for the full depth run. That didn't work out quite right, and that didn't work out quite right, and I think I've just about burnt out a brand new cutter on this hardwood, so just stop filming a bit to sort this out. Well, that's the groove for the truss rod cut out with a little bit of difficulty, and using a brand new TCT cutter. So it's done now anyway. And I've cut a bit out of here. You have to make sure when you're cutting this that you continue it a little bit so that you can get the spanner in the end to adjust the truss rod. And if you're not putting a cover plate on there, you've got to do a really neat job of that. But I am doing, so it didn't really have to be perfect. I'm just looking for it. Nut cover. Where's that gone? Lost it. Lost the nut cover. Heck. So, okay, can't show you that in a minute. So, the truss rod in place, it has to be perfectly flush with that, because obviously it's going to bend and straighten the neck or bend it, whatever. So that's got to be dead flat on there. That's pretty important. And this is the fretboard. I've cut a notch in the end there for the nut to sit in. Now, that's quite important actually, and because the nut has got to just stand proud of this. There's going to be, of course, there's going to be the frets on there, and the notch in the nut. If you notice the nut, can you see that it's a bit thicker at one side than the other? The thickest side is for the thickest string, because that's going to bend more, so it has to be a little bit higher. So you have to cut it so that you have to cut this notch, or plane this to size, to the right thickness. But I thought it would be easier for me to cut a notch than plane it, because after making it, the last thing I want to do is for the plane to just grab it a little bit and cut it wrong, and that's buggered the whole lot. So I've cut the notch out. That's going to sit in there, and it's got to be at such a measurement that when it's sat in, that smallest string should be about 1 millimetre above the top of the frets when they're fitted. There's a little bit of adjustment, but ideally I think that's what it should be. So anyway, that's how I've done it. So that's going to sit with that top of that, with the little notch in there. Anyway, little notch in there, about 3 millimetres above the wood. And now, that being done, I'm going to glue this together, and the top of the truss rod wants to be just level the top of that with where the nut is going to come to. So, i.e., nut there, truss rod just level, like that. And then I'm going to put a gold covered plate on it, so that'll cover up my horrible bit of routing just there, which is a bit tacky, but hey, who cares? It's going to be covered up. Okay, so next stage, glue these two together. So I'll go and do that now.
Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button right here so you can watch my other videos.